Hi, Dad. So, on this occasion, what I want to talk to you about is the brain damage you gave me, um, or more precisely, the mind damage that you gave me, because brain damage implies a traumatic brain injury, and disorders of structural dissociation are not that. Um, and we've got to come up with like better terminology, I think, but because PTSD, like so many psychology diagnoses, is based on what's easy to observe when you're looking at the patient, and not necessarily actually on what's going on. So these people came back from war and they were messed up, and so like, okay, so these people were at war and they've come back and they're messed up. That's the basis on which PTSD got its name, and then from there they started working out something about what's going on. But a lot of people go to war and don't come back messed up that way. Other people get messed up that way without going to war, and it's one of the reasons why they stopped calling it shell shock, is because you don't have to be shot at by artillery in order to end up this way. Um, and and then there's people like me, um, and I get really, really upset when I'm reminded in various ways of how I walked on the broken leg, and I choke up in response to things in relation to food. But I'm fine with the time that a guy held a knife to my throat, and that other guy who threatened to kill me. I was angry about it at the time, but I'm over it. Um, I'm not over the fact that my mother stole chocolate from a closed box in my bedroom, though. And I'm especially not over the fact that you laughed at me when I was upset about that. This naive expectation that I had as a 9-year-old child that my mother would not, I think I was 12, that my mother would not steal from me. It's like, why is it that that's what screws me up as opposed to the life-threatening things that I've had, you know, not huge numbers of them really, but enough that I can tell that it's not the life-threatening stuff that has given me this disorder. It's the unthinkable stuff. I'm pretty sure that what fractured my mind was the times when the things that I needed in order to survive were simultaneously the things that I couldn't think about. And and to the extent that this exercise of recording things and addressed to you for the camera, you know, because I can say these things to you now, and you're not going to hit me in the face, whereas you have done in the past, and and just thinking certain things will make the side of my face clench up and my jaw, and I get muscle aches from it. It's not fun. Um, but here I am saying these things to you, and as it turns out, you're not coming back from the grave and beating me up for it. Nor can you sue. Um, so, so there's a certain freedom that I get from having you dead, uh, and that I'm finally starting to take advantage of. Yeah. So when the unthinkable is essential, that I think is what causes PTSD. I stories of Australians who went to Somalia and were forced to not intervene. You know, there were people being brutally killed nearby, and these people had guns and could have tried to do something, if not for the fact that they would have been breaching international law and starting a war. And they chose to obey orders, not start a war, not breach international law, and they are left with the unthinkable, that maybe if they'd have done something, that 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 things might have worked out differently, that certain people would still be alive, bad guys would be dead. That's really hard. And it's, when I was teaching mental health first aid, there was something that people seemed it would help them understand. Like, some people, like the strength of the trauma and the extent to which you get PTSD, these are completely separate things. So a person can get shot, and obviously getting shot is really, really bad. And the wound can bleed clean, right? There's no infection gets into it, and the person is okay once the immediate injury has been healed, which might take quite a long time in the case of a gunshot wound. Compare that to a paper cut. A paper cut in itself is not dangerous. But if you get a paper cut in a swamp, then an infection might get in, and that infection could do you a hell of a lot of harm. So PTSD, it's not about the injury, it's about the infection that you get from the injury makes you vulnerable to it. And none of the injuries that I suffered are really that bad, frankly. I've had so many conversations with people who suffered objectively far worse events, right? I mean, what happened to me? I wasn't allowed to say certain things, and I had an injury that was aggravated. But the next day, I was taken to hospital, and it's not like, I don't have damage to the bones of my leg anymore. I limp on it because it was so upsetting to not be to be teased and treated like a hypochondriac when I had a very real injury. It just so happened that my leg wasn't visibly, that it was a fracture, not something worse. Yeah. And so growing up with you and your unpredictable moods because your mind was damaged, that damaged my mind. And I'm pretty confident that I've managed to stop paying it forward, that particular problem. Yeah. So that's, I guess, an introduction to the topic of structural dissociation, this business, how it starts, right? It continues because you hate your own mind and you fear it. And that is the difference between dissociative identity disorder and what I think it might be best to call a differentiated identity, because if you're not, if you can work, if you can maintain friendships, if you can take care of yourself, you don't actually have a disorder. There's a whole rant on the subject of whether people actually have disorders or not that I might as well get into, frankly. These people who say so-and-so has narcissistic personality disorder, I have autism. A lot of the time, these people don't have these disorders. They have something that matches the description in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, except for the bit about how it has to be causing you a significant amount of disability. The number, like a person who is actually autistic can't have a conversation. And those people exist, and they have a very serious problem that means that they need help. Because if you can't have a conversation, then you can't get help from people in supportive environments. You can't buy, I remember trying to get on a bus on one occasion, and there was a guy who was completely incapable of understanding that he needed to buy a ticket in order to get on the bus. Right? That is mental illness that is causing a disability. Sometimes being annoying when you talk about trains is not actually mental illness. And this desperate urge to turn everything always into a disease label so that treatments can be sold is a very bad thing. And I know you agree with me on that, right? That this excessive medicalization is driven by greed and incompetence, and that what we need in the world is to accept, well, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? Because on the other hand, being unable to stop talking about trains and annoying everybody sucks. It makes your life harder than it would otherwise be. And people who notice these things about themselves, it's okay. It's okay if you're not actually autistic and you use autism as a word to describe your experience because you're not clinically trained and you don't really know what you're talking about. You need to have some way of saying that you have difficulty with these routine social interactions that seem to be expected from you. Right? People need a way of being able to say, I find that a bit hard. And if you say, I find that a bit hard, then the response that you can expect from the world is, well, grow a pair. Here's a teaspoon of cement, harden up. And we could very usefully be not jerks to the same extent as all of that. We don't have to be jerks about things, right? You shouldn't need hospitalization in order to be given a Band-Aid. But we don't know how to be nice to each other anymore. Or maybe we know how to be nice, but we don't know how to be kind, right? I mean, I can say, hello, good morning, how are you, and not mean a word of it. That's nice. But what if I said, it looks like you've had a bad day. That kind of sucks that you had a bad day. Just acknowledging that truth. My wife says that it helps when I do that, and I choose to believe her. Yeah, like I'm probably gonna if I'm gonna talk for this long, I should probably have notes. But on the one hand, you really did actually injure my mind to the point where I have these problems, and I've been to the psych hospital 3 times, and I'm going again later this year. We have the dates for that, and it's all booked. And on the other hand, you did equip me with a library and a low bullshit way of looking at all of these issues. And that helps, I think. Oh well, that's where that is. We'll see what happens next.